Does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame really matter? Is it truly an honor to be inducted, or does the growing list of legendary acts yet to be included make the award meaningless? Today we're looking at my top 10 Rock Hall Snubs, coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name is Kyle and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's a cool concept. I love the idea of it. I enjoy watching the induction ceremony in concert every year. I've been to the Rock Hall Museum in Cleveland and I loved it, but as an institution, as a way of honoring the greatest talents in the history of rock and roll, I just can't take it seriously. Every year a new class of inductees is announced, and every year we hear the cries of how it isn't fair or how some act does or doesn't deserve to be in the Rock Hall of Fame compared to another. We see acts that have been around for half a century seemingly passed over in favor of acts in just their first or second year of eligibility. And more we're seeing nominations of acts that blur the genre lines of rock and roll music. Does rap and hip-hop belong in the Rock Hall? What about country and jazz? For all those reasons and more, there's a lot of music fans out there that think that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is just a joke. And to be honest, it's hard for me to disagree with them. I do believe that the system is fundamentally flawed, probably beyond repair. And the biggest reason, in my opinion, is the snubs. It's the exclusion of acts that have been eligible for induction for a long time, and it's a list that can only get longer. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the younger acts, the ones that get nominated or even inducted in their first few years of eligibility. There's so many of those that, without hesitation, I would say deserve to be legitimately immortalized in some kind of Hall of Fame. Take Nine Inch Nails, for example. The band received its first Rock Hall nomination in 2016, which was its third year of eligibility. They didn't end up getting in, and they didn't get nominated again in 2017 or 2018 either. That's led a lot of fans to say Nine Inch Nails got snubbed. Okay, hold on here, guys. Let's put things in perspective. Nine Inch Nails released their first album in 1989. Rock Hall eligibility rules dictate that an act's first commercial release must be at least 25 years old, which means that the band first became eligible for nomination in 2014. They've now waited 5 years for induction, and they're still waiting. Is 5 years really a snub? The same year that Nine Inch Nails was nominated, Deep Purple was actually inducted. That band made their commercial debut 2 decades before Nine Inch Nails. They were eligible for 23 years before they were finally put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So let's not, light the torches and march on the Rock Hall on behalf of Nine Inch Nails just yet here. For his part, Nine Inch Nails mastermind Trent Reznor has become one of many rockers in recent years to not only say they don't care about being nominated, but to even go so far as to call the whole thing a bunch of nonsense. Of course, not in so many words. As for me, I've been a Nine Inch Nails fan from the very beginning, and I'd love to see them honored at some point. But when it comes to Rock Hall snubs, there's a long list of acts that have been waiting a heck of a lot longer that I also think deserve to be honored. So today, I'll give you my top 10 Rock Hall snubs. From my list, I'm only including acts that have been eligible for induction for at least 10 years. And in the interest of spanning the generations, I'll be including a broad range of younger and older acts, and of varying genres. Finally, out of respect for the acts that have just been announced for induction in 2019, I will be excluding any of the 2019 nominees that didn't make the cut. Alright, so I'm going to run these down from youngest to oldest in terms of the number of years an act has been eligible for induction. And that means we start with what I think is a major snub. Whitney Houston was one of the biggest hit makers of the 80s. She ultimately became one of the most iconic voices, not only of her generation, but of any generation. Her musical catalog is almost a sacred thing, and only the most talented of singers dare take on one of her songs. She's been eligible for the Hall of Fame since 2008, and if there was ever an artist that deserved the honor in their first year of eligibility, Whitney Houston is it. And had the Rock Hall chosen to honor her in the year after her death in 2012, everyone would have applauded it. Yet remarkably, in the 10 years Whitney Houston has been eligible for induction, she has yet to be nominated a single time. Not even once. Next up is a band that helped define the music video era. Duran Duran was one of the top acts on MTV, not to mention pop radio stations around the world. Duran Duran has released 14 studio albums, 5 of which went platinum in the US, with another 2 going gold. It's easy for some uptight music snobs to dismiss this band's flavor of pretty boy pop rock, but there's no denying the impact they had on the popular music scene during the 80s and 90s, not to mention on pop culture in general. Duran Duran has been eligible for the Rock Hall for 12 years and has yet to score their first nomination. Making their debut just a year earlier was Aussie rockers INXS. Here was a band that managed to establish a fan base that spanned both the fans of the quote-unquote real guitar-based rock and roll, as well as the pop radio music fans looking for hit songs that they could dance to. And in both cases, having a rock star in the classic sense of the word fronting the group truly sealed the deal. Michael Hutchence was like Jim Morrison for a new generation. Once again, though, we're talking about an act that has yet to receive a single Rock Hall nomination in their 13 years of eligibility. 13 hasn't quite been an unlucky number for the next act. Depeche Mode made their commercial debut the same year as INXS, and they managed to snag 2 nominations in both 2016 and 17. And although the group could have been easily forgotten with so many other bubblegum synthesizer acts of the new wave 80s, their sound evolved into something darker and edgier than their earliest music could have possibly suggested. Depeche Mode has certainly become one of the most influential acts of all time when it comes to electronic music, and I think it's fair to say Nine Inch Nails owes them a huge musical debt. I have no doubt that Depeche Mode will eventually be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, hopefully on their next nomination. Next on my list is the first of 2 artists that are already members of the Rock Hall as part of a group, but I think also deserve to be inducted as solo artists. Ozzy Osbourne was first inducted into the Hall of Fame as a member of Black Sabbath in 2004. Ironically, he became eligible for induction as a solo artist the very next year. Now you gotta admit, that would have been pretty cool, being inducted in back-to-back years. In any case, Ozzy's solo career has gone on to match, if not in some ways overshadow, his career with Black Sabbath. I have a feeling, though, that some of the gimmickry and occasionally eye-rollingly bizarre antics that Osbourne has become known for has damaged his chances for induction. So far, he has yet to snag a single nomination. The other solo act on my list is the one that should have been the first female artist to be inducted into the Rock Hall twice, and it should have happened years ago. Tina Turner was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1991 as part of Ike and Tina Turner. From a timing perspective, that makes complete sense. Turner spent the latter half of the 80s reintroducing herself to a new generation of fans, establishing an impressive second act to a career that was already worthy of distinction. Since she technically started releasing solo music as far back as 1974, Tina Turner has been eligible for induction for almost 20 years now. Hopefully that will happen soon, whenever she gets her first and long overdue nomination. Now, a minute ago, I was talking about heavy metal icon Ozzy Osbourne's solo absence from the Hall of Fame. Metal, in general, is a genre that is woefully underrepresented in the Hall, and last year, when they had a chance to rectify the situation, they blew it. Judas Priest received their first ever Hall of Fame nomination on last year's ballot after being eligible since 1999. Inexplicably, they didn't make the cut. Now, I know metal is a tough sell to mass audiences. Metallica is one of the few bands that has managed to find popularity across a truly wide audience base, and they were inducted nearly 10 years ago. It's truly time for the Hall to recognize this long-neglected genre, and no one deserves it more than Judas Priest. So as you can see from the artists I've listed so far, there's a ton of acts that will make you pause and say, wait, they're not in the Rock Hall of Fame yet? Carole King is another one of those. Wait, isn't Carole King already in the Rock Hall? She is, but when she was inducted in 1988, it was not as a performer, but as a songwriter. She was, of course, half of an iconic songwriting duo with partner Jerry Goffin. Together, they wrote over 100 hit songs for other artists. But King truly became a household name when she released her landmark album Tapestry in 1971. That album is included on practically every respectable list of the best albums of all time, and rightfully so. Carole King has gone on to release 18 solo albums. She's won 4 Grammys, and in 2015 became a Kennedy Center honoree. She's arguably one of the most revered female singer-songwriters of all time, and she deserves more credit in the Rock Hall than just a special award. that she shares with a man, no less. My last two Rock Hall snubs are bound to be my most controversial, and that's because neither of these artists would reasonably be considered to be rock acts. But even though it's called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the organization does have a history of honoring influential acts from other musical genres. In fact, I think they've made their eligibility requirements intentionally vague in order to accommodate non-traditional acts, so to speak, when it feels appropriate. For example, part of the Rock Hall's eligibility statement includes the following language. Besides demonstrating unquestionable musical excellence and talent, inductees will have had a significant impact on the development, evolution, and preservation of rock and roll. And in the qualifications for the performers category, the main category that anyone ever talks about, they say this. This category honors bands or solo artists which demonstrate musical excellence. Such a descriptor includes, but isn't limited to, influence on other performers or genres, length and depth of career and catalog, stylistic innovations, or superior technique and skills. So I think both of these sections leave the door open for select artists outside of what we typically call rock and roll. This could explain how the legendary Johnny Cash was inducted into the Rock Hall back in 1992, even though he is unquestionably regarded as one of the most important country music artists of all time. Following similar logic, I would propose that the similarly iconic Willie Nelson deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. Here is a man that's been eligible for 31 years now. He's released 68 albums and counting. Nelson has long embraced more of a rock star persona than that of a country artist, and he's been one of the prime forces behind Farm Aid, the legacy annual benefit concert known more for being a roots rock event than anything else. In my opinion, if the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is willing to embrace country artists like Johnny Cash, like Hank Williams, like Chet Atkins, Bill Monroe, Floyd Kramer, country artists whose influence and impact transcends genre, there's no one more deserving than Willie Nelson. Of course, country music may not be that much of a stretch from rock and roll. There's plenty of artists that blur the genre lines. Elvis Presley is a great example. But what about jazz? There are several noteworthy jazz artists that have been inducted into the early influences category, such as Louis Armstrong, Jelly Roll Morton, and Bessie Smith. But in the performers category, there's really just one so far. He's a big one, though. Miles Davis was inducted into the Rock Hall back in 2006. I mean, if you're going to set a precedent for the inclusion of jazz artists in the Rock Hall, you can't do much better than Miles Davis. But in many ways, John Coltrane could be his equal. In all the ways Miles Davis has become known as the ultimate master of the trumpet, John Coltrane is synonymous with the saxophone. Both of these greats once played together, with Davis paving the way for Coltrane's ascension. But what John Coltrane accomplished was far, far more than riding on Davis's coattails. He went on to release 45 albums, including the highly influential Giant Steps and A Love Supreme. This was music that inspired artists of every genre, and it's probably safe to say that there's no sax player in all of rock and roll that hasn't studied his work. The question of whether jazz artists belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is highly debatable, I won't deny, but if the answer is yes, and if we're willing to open the door a little wider and give that genre more consideration, John Coltrane should be the one to follow in Miles Davis's footsteps. So there you go, my top 10 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snubs in order of years snubbed. And I gotta tell you, the list I whittled this down from was 3 times as long and shockingly easy to make. Which brings me back to my original point about the Rock Hall. You really shouldn't take it all that seriously. It's a worthy idea to be sure, but clearly any artist's value in the history of music shouldn't be based on whether or not they've been arbitrarily included in any Hall of Fame. As I was researching this video and looking at all the artists that have been inducted into the 3+ decade history of the Rock Hall, there wasn't a single honoree that I disagreed with. We could certainly debate about issues like genre, timing, priority order, and various kinds of bias, but all that does is denigrate the talent of one artist at the expense of another. All that being said, I know you all have your opinions about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I want to hear them. So down in the comments section below, let me know what you think. Who do you think are the biggest Rock Hall snubs? How do you feel about different genres being included? Not just country or jazz, but what about rap and hip-hop? And if you were to create your own Hall of Fame, what would your rules for inclusion look like? Wow, lots and lots to think about here. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, plus check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to click subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.